welcome to a brand new episode of Time Podcast. We are bringing a very unique episode today. As you guys can see, it's a much different scene than what we usually do. We're not in our usual studio. We are on Zoom for the first time, and I'm joined as always by Brock and Brad. We might be joined by Zach later, but we are here to preview UFC 249 this Saturday, Tony Ferguson versus Justin Gaethje. You know, I'll be honest, even up to this point, we are however many days away from the event, and I'm still with a mindset of I'll believe it when I see it. Brad, did you ever think we would see a UFC event this soon after the previous card was canceled and everything that's been going on?
I didn't actually think that we would be back this soon. As long as I'm no doctor, so I don't know what precautions they have made, and I don't know exactly how safe it's going to be, but there's nothing I can do but watch the fights.
Yeah, so I was seeing something when I was looking up some stuff for this fight on SureDog. There's a headline that said all the fighters will be tested for COVID-19 before they eventually do fight. I know even with that, some people are still very hesitant. You've seen a slew of journalists that just don't want this event to happen. They didn't want the previous event to happen. Like, in your opinion, do you think it's a good idea for this event to happen? Like, you have to balance your fandom of mixed martial arts and like just being a good person. You don't want someone to get hurt. You don't want someone to get sick. So, like, in your opinion, do you want this card to happen?
I think this card could have waited. I think some of the matchups, while there are no really bad matchups, I feel like, for example, Tony Ferguson gains 0 from fighting Justin Gaethje. Some of these matchups could have waited. We don't need to see Greg Hardy fight. There's no hurry for that. I mean, but I'm excited to finally see fighting again. And and like I said, I'm no doctor. All I can do is trust that they put every precaution into place that they have. They have state recognition. They have the governor. They have everything that they can normally do. So I don't know what else I can further ask.
Yeah, I'm conflicted with it because I'm going crazy without sports in general, not even just without fighting, without sports and without any kind of entertainment. But we have this fight with Tony Ferguson and Justin Gaethje. Obviously, it's not the ideal fight. We all want Tony Ferguson versus Khabib Nurmagomedov. Will that fight ever happen? I don't know. We don't seem to know because 5 times this fight has been scheduled and 5 times it has been canceled over the span of however many years. So, as we know, Tony Ferguson, being the crazy man that he is, he still cut weight for the previous card before it got canceled, and he did hit the mark of 155 pounds. That worries a lot of people going into this because hitting 2 big weight cuts consecutively in a matter of weeks of each other, it could take a lot out of him going against a guy like Justin Gaethje. Brock, I wanted to ask you because I know you've had a lot of experience with weight cutting. I mean, my experience with it is very minor. I know you've had some big cuts in your life. Do you think we'll see 100% Tony Ferguson, this Saturday?
It is really tough to say. I thought it was cool he made the cut. Was it necessary? No. But I feel like mentally that's something that means a lot to him. That's like a milestone for him. That's what completes his training camp, right? So by him hitting that, I feel like he felt fulfilled almost for that time at least. He shouldn't be affected too greatly. He's had a few weeks to recover. How many? 3-4 weeks now, maybe?
Yeah.
On top of that, considering he did do that cut, his weight shouldn't have been too high, at least coming into this next weight cut. You would hope he's not 175 pounds, 180 pounds anymore or anything like that. Or you would hope he's between 165, 170 maximum is what obviously you're going to want to hope for. The less weight to cut, the better. You're going to recover a lot faster.
Can I ask you this? When you're in wrestling season, how close together are your cuts? Are they weekly, bi-weekly when you're in season?
So a normal wrestling season, the way it was set up for us was Tuesday night wrestling meet, Thursday night wrestling meet, Saturday morning through the day, sometimes Sunday morning through the day, were tournaments and different dual meets and things like that, tri meets and stuff. So depending, basically with wrestling, at least for me, I tried to stay within 5 to 10 pounds at all times, and that was in shape and hydrated. And excuse me. And there were times where you just can't seem to get weight off for some reason. Your body just doesn't agree with you. I've had bad cuts where I've told my coach, "Hey, coach, I'm gonna go run for 2 hours during practice because I gotta lose 15 pounds or something, something like that." But for the most part, because it's so consistent, your body kind of gets used to it. You keep
Mhm.
your weight lower, and you kind of just adapt to it. Like it is very tiring to cut weight. Um you feel less energetic. You feel weaker. Obviously, what happens when you're dehydrated, when you haven't eaten, things like that. But I think the best thing that he could have done might have been that weight cut mentally. Maybe not
I
physically, but mentally for him.
I tend to agree. I tend to feel like when fighters go up in weight and they don't have to make a cut, they don't always show themselves to be the best because they're missing that one last part of their training camp, that part that really brings them into focus.
Right.
It's
And
almost like
when
a victory. It's a victory before you fight, I would say. It's like hitting that mark and you feel motivated after getting that accomplished.
it's 100% a victory.
Oh,
It's
definitely.
the
Yeah.
fight before the fight. It's always been called that.
A lot, a
So
lot of guys will say, it's harder than the fight, or it's just as hard as the fight. It's cutting weight for
Uncle
some people.
your Uncle Chael says that, Nick.
Yeah.
Yep.
His cuts to 85 were definitely probably not the best thing for him, how big
Pretty
of a guy
brutal.
he is. But
Nah.
I think this is really this is the epitome of Tony Ferguson. This is like what Tony Ferguson is all about. Like if this
Mhm.
didn't happen, we'd be making memes talking about Tony Ferguson's the type of guy to finish a weight cut when he's not going to be fighting and like that kind of shit. Like it doesn't surprise me that he did that. But
Right.
uh, we're going into this fight with Justin Gaethje, and I think Justin Gaethje really is a dark horse in his division. Do I think he's the best fighter in the division? No. But do I think he's a bad matchup for a lot of guys in the division? Absolutely. I think a lot of people think that he is a bad matchup for Khabib. That remains to be seen, but I think he's a bad matchup for anybody. And this fight with Tony Ferguson is included, where me being a guy that wants to see Tony Ferguson versus Khabib, this fight scares me because there's a lot on the
I
line.
agree.
If Khabib, I mean, if Tony doesn't get this done, then maybe this fight is ruined forever. But if we come out of this with Tony winning, especially in impressive fashion, then maybe we have an even bigger fight than before. Because I think back to Conor McGregor when he beat Chad Mendes, because that was a very high risk fight that he didn't necessarily need to take. But
Definitely.
after he came out of it, he came out, you know, even bigger stock and even bigger hype for the Jose Aldo fight. So that's really my take on it. So I wanted to get right into the predictions of the fight. As we look at this fight now, like I said, I think Gaethje serves a lot of problems for Tony Ferguson, but I do think that Tony Ferguson will get it done because I think Justin Gaethje is shown to be very hittable. I think that Tony Ferguson's just going to do what he does, where, as Zach said one time, he makes his opponents look like they got dragged behind a truck, and, it just looks like they've been in a fight. Brock, what do you think?
I couldn't agree more, man. I 100% agree. Justin Gaethje does get hit a lot. He seems to be that guy to take two to give one type deal, And but see, a lot of guys can't do that though, right? But Justin Gaethje has cinder blocks for hands, so when he hits you back, you don't move, right? It also worries me because the same thing we're saying about Gaethje, we've seen the tendencies in Tony, right? We've seen Tony eat a ridiculous amount of punches. I believe Pettis dropped him, right? Pettis dropped him,
Oh,
and he
yeah.
did that like
Linda
front
Banana
roll.
dropped him when he fought. I remember that.
He
Right.
always does that Dark Souls escape from danger roll whenever he gets hit.
That's a good comparison.
Right. So basically off of that, right? So he gets rocked. I think that's when he hit that elbow and then front rolled and got out. And then Pettis was leaking, and obviously we see how that fight went. But it just worries me, man. I'm a huge fan of Tony. I'm a huge fan of Justin. I still want to see Tony fight Khabib, which means that my guy Justin is going to have to lose in the 4th round via TKO.
I like that. I like that prediction. Brad.
I find it hard to disagree with Brock. Just to go to my pick here, Tony, I figure he's on a 12-fight streak.
12, yes.
Yeah, 12 fight, 8 years, 9 stoppages, 6 submissions, a KO punch, a doctor stoppage, and a corner stoppage. He's just on one of those runs that it would almost be criminal to stop it without reaching the belt. And I mean, Gaethje's on a 3 knockout streak of his own, and he's a fair competitor, and he hits harder than pretty much anybody at 155. But yeah, I got to think that Tony has shown the ability to take damage and weather the storm and get through tough parts, and his unmatched cardio is probably most of the reason for that, because when you have cardio like that, you can recover from being rocked and get up again quicker. His cardio is
sure a lot better, a lot faster.
Yeah, that's the biggest secret to cardio right there, is to recover from getting rocked.
Right.
Way better.
And Gaethje's a guy with some really solid wrestling, really good wrestling. But that's not really I'm not yeah, I'm not that's what I'm saying. Like, I'm not too worried about it. Because even if he does present it, I feel like Tony's gonna hold his own just fine. I mean, he's preparing for Khabib, but you got that down, right? You figured that part out already. The only thing that worries me is Gaethje's hands, man.
Mm-hmm.
He hits so hard that I still think Tony's gonna win, but I think if Justin is to win, it's gotta be by like a flash KO, because they both eat a lot of punches.
Mm-hmm.
Tony's either gonna wear him down. Exactly, yeah. That's the one thing that scares me about Tony in this fight.
Yeah, so I mean, both of these guys, the momentum going into this fight, because as Brad was saying, Justin Gaethje being on a 3-fight knockout streak. I remember before that started, he was on a little bit of a decline, getting finished by Eddie Alvarez and Dustin Poirier. Obviously, no shame losing to either of those guys. But before his winning streak started, I thought maybe he'd be on his way out, and he faced the best of the division. He just couldn't handle it, but he definitely proved me wrong many, many times. But I think the main reason why I believe Tony Ferguson wins this fight amongst a lot of other fights is what Zach calls the magic. He has the magic right now. It's like momentum times 10 because of the big winning streak that he's on, and you can't even remember the last time he lost. And it just seems like everything fires on all cylinders when you have that kind of momentum. And he goes in there and does what he does. He's not worried about what his opponent's doing. And that's the kind of mindset that Tony Ferguson brings to a fight. And I hope he does prove me right. And I hope we do see Tony Ferguson versus Khabib later this year. That is my optimal thinking right now. But I do want to move to the co-main event. And it's a fight that I'm looking forward to just as much as I am this main event. Call me crazy, but we're seeing Henry Cejudo defend his bantamweight championship against Dominick Cruz, the former 2-time champion. This is a fight that not a lot of us were expecting to hear, because you have a lot of bantamweight contenders waiting in the wings. Peter Yan and Aljamain Sterling, one of my favorites. I wanted him to get the title shot, but I'm not going to act like this fight doesn't intrigue the hell out of me, because it does. I want to see.
I was extremely surprised.
I want to see how Dominick Cruz, how has his layoff affected him? He hasn't fought since he lost to Cody Garbrandt in dominant fashion.
2017, I believe.
Yeah,
16, and December 16.
Yeah, 2016. Yeah,
16.
And obviously we all know Dominick Cruz's track record when it comes to injuries. I mean, he has had the who's who of injuries: ACL tears, foot breaks, everything. So, I mean, Brock, I know you're a big Dominick Cruz guy. Do you think he stands a chance against Henry Cejudo in this form?
I do, man. I've been watching a lot of him lately, a lot of training videos, and if I'm not mistaken, I think he trains with Gaethje.
Does he?
Am I wrong there? I think he does. I could be wrong. I'll have to look it up. But I know his camp. He's got a lot of guys in his camp that are really solid training partners. He's got his footwork is mesmerizing, right? I absolutely love watching him do stand-up. It's hard to replicate, and it's hard to defend against. That's one of my favorite things, and that's what was so like intriguing about that Cody Garbrandt fight for me, is the way that he was able to almost stop everything Dominic was able to do. But then you got a guy like Henry who's bringing in so many different dynamic traits, right? Like, he's a shorter guy, but he's explosive, he's fast, his wrestling is arguably the best in the division. His hands are developing light years every time he fights.
If you want
That's
to
my
talk about the
biggest
quickest
takeaway.
improvements in like somebody's game in between fights, was Henry Cejudo because he fought DJ for the belt the first time and got knocked out. Then he fought
Yeah.
Joseph Benavidez. I believe he dropped a decision in that. And then the next fight after that against Wilson Hayes, he looked like a completely different man. It was so
Karate Kid, man.
unbelievable. Yeah, the karate stance, and I just didn't even know who I was looking at, and that impressed the hell out of me. So whenever he fights now, I don't know what to expect, and I think he will and continue to exponentially raise his game.
See, to me, his karate stance is cute. He's not using it right. He's using it, but he's not doing karate. He's boxing out of a karate stance. He didn't beat DJ when they fought for the 125 belt. TJ, under normal circumstances, eats that punch all day. The Moraes fight is what impressed me by him the most. And at the same time, Cruz is a different guy mentally than anybody else in the entire UFC. He claims ring rust doesn't exist, and apparently for him it doesn't. It's a fact of fighting for everyone else, but Dominic doesn't seem to have a problem with the layoff. It's been since December 30th, 2016, since he's fought against what was that? That was the Garbrandt fight.
Cody Garbrandt.
That was the Garbrandt loss.
And I mean, the way he trains, if he comes back and looks like Dominick Cruz that we've seen in every other fight except for that Cody Garbrandt fight, I don't see the much smaller, much more singular in his attack style guy in Cejudo being able to outmatch the more creative, more diverse attacker in Dominic.
Brad, not to break your train of thought, but I'm loving the surprise appearance by Severus in the background.
Yeah,
not an Ovechkin fan, as I'm learning.
It looks like it.
He was swatting at the jersey. It was so funny. But going back to the fight, of course. Dominick Cruz, I love watching him fight so much. Like Brock said, I think his footwork is some of the best, some of the most entertaining you can ever see. I don't care if his fights go to decision all the time, because it's like whenever he's in there, it's like he's painting a picture. It's just something way different than you'll see in any division, really. Even in the lighter weight divisions, you don't see somebody with footwork like him, and you hear him break down the game, and he does seem to be levels ahead. And I do, from time to time, enjoy his commentary. I know a lot of people aren't really big on his commentary in the UFC, but I do think he brings a lot of knowledge to this game. But obviously,
I like his commentary when it's commentary, and not when he's attacking dudes that are against his training partners or he's gonna fight. He's very biased that way.
If I had to pick like a bet on this fight, very hard to pick because there's so many question marks with Dominick Cruz's injury record. I don't know. I would hope that he would come into this fight fully prepared to try to be a champion, not just taking a fight for the hell of it. But if I had to make a pick for this fight, as much as I don't want to do this, I think Henry Cejudo wins this fight. Does he finish Dominick Cruz? I don't think so, because I think Dominick Cruz has proven, even in his form these days, that he can withstand a lot of punishment. Cejudo's wrestling will probably be a big factor in this fight. Can he keep Dominick Cruz on the mat? That remains to be seen. But I do think that Cejudo takes a unanimous decision and retains his championship. Brock, what do you think?
I kind of have to agree with you, man. As much as I love Dominick Cruz and the Muhammad Ali-esque work that he does on the feet and everything like that, I got a weird feeling that Cejudo's just gonna be, he was here, then he was here, then he was here, and now I feel like he's gonna be through the roof, right? Like he's had a good bit of time off, right? It's been, oh man, it's been a while, right? So he's had a lot of time off. He's been healing. I know that. He's been training hard. I see him posting all these pictures all the time, all these videos and training. I
Yeah,
just
so
feel like whatever he's got going on right now, training camp wise, partner wise, mentality, I think that he is more than likely gonna be champ for a while. And that's what makes me very excited, like Nick was talking about earlier for the Aljamain Sterling fight. I think Aljamain should be fighting him right now, if I'm being honest.
Yeah.
I think he should have fought him a few months back or whatever.
Yeah, Aljo is definitely the contender right now.
Definitely. So, like, win or lose here, I don't want to see, win or lose, I don't want to see anybody but Aljamain Sterling fight for that belt, right? And the only thing that would maybe interest me is like a Peter Yan contender fight. But at that point, I would rather see Aljamain fight for the belt, right? Whoever wins fights Peter Yan. That's just my preference. I'd like to see it that way because I'd really like to see Aljo get in and get his title shot. But obviously, that's not how things work all the time. A fight's a fight. Sometimes you gotta take what you gotta take to get to that spot.
Brad, how much of a chance do you think Dominick Cruz has this Saturday?
I actually believe in Dominick Cruz. He's been out for since 2016, and Cejudo's only been out since last June. But other than that, I think Dom matches up very well with Cruz or with Cejudo, and I mean, Cruz was a wrestler. I don't think that Cejudo is going to be able to just dominate with wrestling, especially with a guy who is as hard to time and catch as Cruz is. I don't know that the wrestling is going to be there, and he hasn't seen someone like Cruz on the feet yet. I think Cruz has a very fair shot at this fight, and I mean, I would even pick him to take a decision.
I like that. I hope you're right, but I think something we don't talk about too much because we talk so much about his footwork is Dominick Cruz's scrambling ability from the top and the bottom, where it seems like whenever he's in a grappling exchange, he always seems to come out on top of it. His fights with Uriah Faber remind me of that,
Definitely.
Where it just seems like he knows what to do in the short little moments that the fight is on the ground, and that's what you need when you're an offensive and defensive wrestler. And I certainly hope you're right, Brad, because I would love to see Dominick Cruz back on the top of the mountain. But I also agree with Brock, where I just hope that Aljamain Sterling gets what is owed to him after this is all said and done.
Yeah, I gotta agree with that. I'm reminded of what Cruz did to Mizugaki.
Oh my God!
When he came back.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the Faber fights. I mean, Cruz is just a different guy. Other than that, the Garbrandt fight. Now, if that's our new normal for Cruz, then I'm going to be completely wrong. But
how much do you credit Cody Garbrandt's like showing up to that? Because maybe did Dominick Cruz look bad, or did Cody Garbrandt just look so good that night?
Yes, and I mean,
I think that was Cody Garbrandt, 100%. I think Dominick Cruz was about as close to 100% as any fighter with injuries and etc. outside problems could be, right? But whatever he had that night, now that I'm thinking about it, I kind of think, if you've noticed, he's lost 3 in a row by knockout since then.
Yes.
TJ, and then who was his last
Pedro
fight?
Munoz.
Yes, and he got TKO'd or knocked out all 3 times. In my opinion, it's a temper thing, right? He fights really, really stupid when it comes to those exchanges. He wants to get on top. He wants to get the hardest hit in. He wants to get the last hit in. He doesn't care how many times he gets hit, right?
Mm-hmm.
It does not seem to work out for him.
No, not anymore.
Right.
Cody Garbrandt's kind of worn that out to this point.
Right. And what I think he did in that Dominick Cruz fight was genuinely maybe get under Dominick's skin and create an environment where he's not the one who's angry. He's not the one who necessarily has to attack or push any sort of engagement, right? You got a guy in Dominick Cruz who's impossible to time. You can't grapple with the guy, right? Because he's lightning quick. He just, everything about him is bulletproof, theoretically, on paper, right?
Mm-hmm.
Whatever he did that night mentally to prepare himself for that fight, he could not have done it any better. I mean, that is the best version of Cody Garbrandt we might ever see. And trust me, I hope it comes back because I really liked that fight. As much as a Dom fan that I was and a Cody fan that I was, it was hard to watch my boy Dom get beat down like that. But it made me very happy for Cody, considering that might be like the next guy. It was heartbreaking seeing him get knocked out 3 times in a row because he can't control a temper, in my opinion. That's like your whole issue.
His temper, and if he fights Dillashaw 100 times, he's gonna lose.
Basic timing too, right? Like the basic boxing, he's gonna drop his right hand, swing wild with the left, like basic brawler when he's going against a guy who might be a little unconventional and crack him, which happened 3 times. Not knocking the guy. He still has really solid boxing, really solid wrestling. It's just whatever he's got going on right now. I just hope that in all this time off that he's had in the last 2 years or whatever it is, I'm praying that he figured out a way to get back to December 30th, 2016, Cody Garbrandt.
Yeah.
But, so that was the ultimate point that we were making, is that maybe it wasn't just Dominick Cruz looking bad. Maybe he was, it showed up in good form, and maybe we do see a good Dominick Cruz because maybe he never left going into this fight. But I definitely look forward to that fight just as much as the main event. But we're going to move on to the next fight below that, and that's Francis Ngannou taking on Yair Rozenstruik. That is a very interesting heavyweight fight because obviously – when Ngannou's on, he looks like an absolute machine, and he seems to be one of the hardest-hitting men to have ever stepped inside of a cage. He takes on Rozenstruik, who got a very last-second win against Alistair Overeem.
You could call it lucky, right? I mean, he was going to – in my opinion, he was going to lose that fight.
Absolutely, yeah. He was going to lose the decision. It's just a matter of, like, some people think the stoppage was a tad early. Obviously, you saw what happened to Overeem's lip when –
No,
Shit was over.
That would have been a TKO or a knockout, right? If he had any longer time, that was it.
I think so, yeah.
He was looking at stars against the cage. He was done anyways. But
not to sound like some kind of like just bleed guy, but I did want to see, just because it was towards the end of the fight and it was like 10 seconds left, I wanted to see if Overeem had anything left to offer, maybe just to fight off those last few seconds. But at any other time in the round, it certainly would have been over. I think Rozenstruik would have landed that shot when Overeem landed on his ass. But, I bring that up because I think we saw a lot of holes in Rozenstruik's game. Obviously, Alistair Overeem's game is much different than Francis Ngannou. But I'm a belief that Francis Ngannou could very easily be the UFC heavyweight champion. And I think if he gets another shot against if he gets a rematch with Stipe Miocic or if he fights Daniel Cormier, he could very easily win that fight. But looking at this fight, Brad, what is your initial prediction for this?
It's a pick'em to me, really. It's whoever intercontinental ballistic missile lands first. These dudes are throwing the heaviest of bombs, and I mean, it's the battle of the weirder name. I don't know. Francis Ngannou versus Jairzinho Rozenstruik. Nick bailed out on his name. His name's so weird. But, I mean, to me, there's so much you can say about technique and this and that, but it's not going to come down to that in this fight. This fight is about who hits first and harder.
Right, who's getting that shot, yeah.
Yeah. And I think Rozenstruik has just as good a shot. Cool. But
sick.
We all get the same thing.
Yeah, sweet.
To me, it's a pick'em fight based on power, and neither of these guys are short for power.
Oh, right, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's just there's levels to
at
this game.
60. Their power's at 110.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's levels to this game. You know, when it comes to power, I do think Rozenstruik hits very, very hard. He's got quite a few knockouts on his resume, but with a guy like Ngannou, I mean, we've seen him send guys' heads to another planet. That's really my X factor for this fight, and I think the only thing that would ever stop me from picking Ngannou in a fight is him being stupid, him not coming in mentally prepared, because even like he's not the most conditioned athlete in the world. No UFC heavyweight really is, but I think the only thing that stops his conditioning is when he does stupid things in fights and tries lunging for way too many shots and gasses himself out like he did in the Stipe fight. But yeah, I'll just give my prediction now. I think that Ngannou, puts another head on his mantle and gets one step closer to a UFC title shot. Brock, what do you think?
I agree with you. I mean, like we were talking about with that Overeem fight, I don't know. I wasn't necessarily impressed. I mean, he looked good. Don't get me wrong. I like that fight. That was a very fun fight. That was a good fight. I didn't necessarily see anything that made me think that he has the attributes to be the champion yet or beat a contender for the championship.
Even be a top contender. I don't see it.
We'll see what Rozenstruik can do, but I have to agree with you guys that Ngannou probably looks better.
Definitely, and I believe that if he's evolved a lot too, right? He's another case of, okay, well, let me just hop in to the Shark Tank and figure out what we got to do. Loses to Stipe, gets his wrestling better, gets his conditioning better. He's like even more shredded and even bigger than he was then, right? Like his overall health is improving. Like his fitness and everything is going through the roof. He's still very young in the sport. I mean, he beat a guy in Overeem who's been fighting, 30 years. Shit, Overeem's probably been fighting 25 years or something like that. K1 champ, like that. You don't just beat a guy like that with luck, really. I mean, that takes talent. That takes raw talent and hard work, dedication, and things like that. I mean, he's still very young in his career, and for him to already be at this point, I feel like Nick was saying, he is that next guy. He's one of the only guys in the heavyweight division that's still on the younger side. But then you got a guy like DC, you got a guy like Stipe, things like that he has to beat.
Yeah. To me, there's not really much else to say about this fight other than Ngannou looks like he's the guy at heavyweight, and Rozenstruik could put up a pretty good defense, but it looks like Ngannou is the guy heading up to the top of the mountain.
Brad, we've seen in the past with Ngannou versus Derek Lewis. Obviously, we kind of just tend to forget about that fight because of how bad it was. Do you think that this fight has any chance of being a stinker? Because every time it seems like we have two hard-hitting guys, not every time, but sometimes when you have two hard-hitting guys and they bill it as like, there's no way this fight goes the distance, there's no way this fight is boring, I feel like there's a chance this fight could be a stinker. What do you think?
I mean, there's always that chance, but I don't think that with Ngannou and that Derek Lewis fight, that is a problem that he is fixed in his game.
I think so.
We've seen him make the next step after the Stipe fight and get over the fear through the Lewis fight. So I don't see that being an issue. I see Ngannou coming out, throwing everything he's got like he usually does.
So we're going to move on to a fight I think could easily take fight of the night, and that is Jeremy Stephens stepping up against Calvin Kattar. I've heard his name pronounced many ways, but I think Kattar is the proper pronunciation. Two absolute sluggers, and I think this is a fight that cannot be boring, just because I think of Jeremy Stephens and the kind of attitude that he brings to the cage. And Calvin Kattar, except for one minor setback against Zabit, I think he is like undefeated in the octagon, and he's one of the best prospects in this division, in this featherweight division. And I just have so many good things to say about this fight, and I'm looking forward to it so much. This is a big step up for Calvin Kattar. Besides the Zabit fight, I think he showed a lot of promise in that Zabit fight, especially being much more conditioned than Zabit, and that was a 3-round fight, so that kind of favored Zabit. But I just think this is a straightforward slugfest, and that's what Jeremy Stephens thrives in. Does he win this fight? I'm not sure, but Brad, what do you think of this? Have you been watching what Calvin Kattar has done?
I have been watching Calvin Kattar, and you're right. They're actually both coming off of losses to Zabit. Kattar has one other loss in the UFC against Renato Canario, whatever.
Oh, he lost to Moicano. Okay, all right.
Yeah, but other than that, he's got a good KO against Ricardo Lamas, and I just think he's the younger, less damaged, less weathered guy. Although he's only a year younger than Jeremy Stephens. Jeremy Stephens is surprisingly young. Both about 33 years old. But I feel like Kattar is going one way, and then Stephens is coming down the other side of the hill in his career.
Yeah, it's certainly when it comes to talking about how old a fighter is, sometimes, a person could just be fight old, where even like guys like BJ Penn and Shogun, they were in their early 30s, and you would look at them and think they're like well into their 40s because, fighting's a hard sport to be in, and it definitely ages you faster, ages your body faster. So when we're saying, comparing their ages, maybe Kattar's on the younger side of the fight age.
Kattar's 20-7. Jeremy Stephens is 28-17. Or 20-4, and then 28-17. That's a huge difference in fight age. And I really just think that Calvin Kattar is going to come in and probably be able to get him out of there. Maybe late, probably in the third, but I think Kattar will be able to get Stephens out of there.
Brock, how much of a chance do you think this fight has of taking fight of the night, and ultimately, what is your prediction for it?
So I do want to say I was obviously mistaken earlier. It wasn't Justin. It was Jeremy who trains with Dominick Cruz.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I was mistaken on that, so my apologies. But I've always liked the product that comes out of Dom's camp, right? I've always been a fan of Jeremy Stephens. He had that tough loss to Yair most recently, and before that, I believe it was Aldo. He lost to Aldo before that. The Yair fight was really good. I just wish I can't remember off the top of my head. I think it was a gas tank issue, but I can't really remember. I think they were both beyond gas because they were trying to kill each other. But I hope this fight. I really don't know who to pick here. I'm kind of torn. A lot of people are going to say Calvin. I'm going to go ahead and stick with my boy here. I feel like they're going to burn the place down and probably get fight of the night, honestly, because they're going to be fighting in a tire, right, for 4 rounds or 3 rounds. I mean, they're going to be fighting in a tire, just slugging with each other, more than likely. And I'm excited for it. It shortens careers and everything. It sucks, but you gotta admit, those are the most entertaining fights most of the time.
Yeah. So, I mean, I don't think either one of these gentlemen would have it any other way, especially Jeremy. I think that's just how he lives, and he wants to live and die by the sword. And when it comes to Calvin Kattar, I think when you look at his resume, obviously having a win like Ricardo Lamas is very impressive, but I look at another win of his that it wasn't until this opponent made his own waves in the UFC after this fight happened, and that's Shane Burgos. He knocked out Shane Burgos, and since then, Shane Burgos has been on an absolute tear, beating Cup Swanson amongst many other names. It was one of those fights that between Kattar and Burgos where you had 2 very promising prospects, but you didn't realize what you were looking at quite yet, where both of them had to build the resume afterwards. And we look back at that and be like, man, that might have been a number 1 contender fight we just didn't know about. And these 2 were, very strong contenders in the making. But I would like to think that this fight has 3-round war written all over it. We've seen Jeremy Stephens get finished before, but I do think he'll withstand the punishment that Kattar puts out. But I do have Calvin Kattar taking a 3-round decision, and I do think this is going to be fight of the night. But we are going to move on to one of the most interesting experiments that we've ever had in the UFC, and that is in the form of Greg Hardy. This is it just intrigues the hell out of me in weird ways, because this guy Greg Hardy, obviously, former NFL star, and then he had a slew of things outside of the sport that put a very negative image on him and the team he was on.
I guess you'd have to call it an allegation, right? I don't know if anything was ever
so it's alleged and blah blah blah.
Yeah.
We dig into that a little bit, because the thing that intrigues me so much with him and being in the UFC, it's like, yes, I do think that to some degree, things that happen outside of the sport should be kept outside of the sport. Like, if somebody's the best in the world, they should be able to fight. And, obviously if they commit crimes and stuff, they should be held accountable. But
yeah,
you have a guy with Greg Hardy that he was just taking up the sport of mixed martial arts when the UFC signed him and put him in the Dana White's Contender Series. It's like, you look at how they're treating him, how they're like putting him on this fast track. It's almost like
trying to make him a superstar.
And I'm just confused as to why they would want to do that. But here we are. I do not know the UFC's mindset, but he does seem to be a very promising talent in this sport. Very, very good football player turned mixed martial artist, and he has looked very good. He actually just came off of a short notice fight against Alexander Volkov. It was very respectable they stepped in that, because I believe I'm trying to remember who was supposed to be in that fight with Volkov, but Greg Hardy steps in and
wasn't it JDS?
Yes, I think you're right, Brad.
Yeah,
he was supposed to
I believe
Junior Dos Santos, but Junior Dos Santos falls out, and Greg Hardy steps in and he loses a 5-round decision. A lot of people thought he was going to get finished with ease, but he stood the 5 rounds and lost, a rather lopsided decision. But he goes back to fighting guys with his experience. Yorgan De Castro, his opponent, only has 6 professional fights. He is 6-0. He seems to be quite a mixed martial arts. Yes.
He's a kickboxer.
Is he? I don't know too much about this guy. Educate me.
I did a little bit of research. Yorgan De Castro was a kickboxer. He had a kickboxing background before moving to MMA. I've watched his 2 fights, one in the Contender Series, actually the first fight at the Apex Center, Yorgan De Castro, for trivia buffs out there. He's got powerful Muay Thai, and he looks like a real good technical striker with some bombs. I don't actually like Hardy's chance in the stand-up.
So you think that Greg Hardy's probably going to look for a takedown of sorts?
If he wants to, that is really where I saw De Castro struggle in his 2 fights, is in the wrestling department.
And that's pretty on par for a guy who's a kickboxer.
Yeah. He's like a Muay Thai kickboxer guy. Oh, he's got power and he's got some hands on him.
I hope he does.
Yeah. Now Hardy is at ATT, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
So he's got the best coaches around him. He's got Dean Thomas. He's got Mike Brown. He's got the best coaching.
Phenomenal gym. I mean, you can't really ask for any better other than maybe TriStar.
There's no better gym. There's just another place at that level.
Right.
There's TriStar. There's AKA. There's ATT. Those gyms are the peak. You really can't get better than that.
So, Brock, I have to ask you the most important question when it comes to this fight. Do you think Greg Hardy takes a hit of his inhaler?
Oh, jeez. I hope he takes a hit of face to the mat. I don't like that guy, man.
I never have. And I'll be completely honest. Every time he fights, I root for his opponent.
I pray. I get on my knees and pray to the MMA gods that he gets like all of his teeth knocked out of his mouth.
It's not that I don't care. Yeah, it's not that I don't care about this fight. It's just like I'm kind of breezing through it because there's so much more to talk about.
My mouth, you know what I mean? Like they're trying to push this guy like it's kind of like the situation back in, who was it, Herschel Walker?
Better.
Which that's even different, I guess. But
because
it's
Herschel
like the
Walker
same idea.
Wasn't in the UFC. A better example would be Kimbo Slice in Tough 10. They have been starved for a heavyweight talent.
Oh yeah. Since they lost Lesnar.
That's what, since Brock. I mean, since before Brock, they always have been searching for that heavyweight star.
Mm-hmm.
That might be part of the theory in it, I keep asking why they're pushing this guy so hard. Maybe that's the good point, Brad, is that they do need a heavyweight star.
Mm-hmm. Well,
right, because they believe in that old school mindset. Heavyweight champ's baddest guy in the world. He's going to draw the most money, things like that. But statistically, I don't know if that's true. It really seems like it's the light heavyweights and the lightweights really seem to be the two weight classes that draw the most because they got the names behind them, I guess.
Light heavyweight was traditionally huge, but then while John was on its run, it kind of settled out. But we had middleweight and welterweight,
right?
And now
you definitely had spurts of everything in between. You had a run for a year or a couple months of each, but the most consistent it seemed to have been light heavyweight with a little bit of other things sprinkled in throughout.
Yeah. So, do you have a pick on this one? Everybody just going with Jorgen?
I'm going to go with Jorgen via head kick to the cranium.
My prediction is the same as always. Greg Hardy's opponent. That's who I have.
So Jorgen has, at the Dana White Contender Series, he leg kicked a dude and then took him out. And then he also has just a guy, his first fight in the UFC, the guy charged him. And he just dropped him with a leg. The hook didn't even hit anything but air because he hit the ground after the straight. So I like Castro. He actually looks like a real good fighter to me coming up.
All right. So we move on to the next fight. And as I'm moving down this fight card, it's just like, God damn, this card is so stacked because it seems like we've been talking forever, but we still have a beast-ass fight and a rematch of a fight that we've seen before. It's Anthony Showtime Pettis versus Donald Cowboy Cerrone. This is a rematch of a fight I believe happened back in 2013 where Anthony Pettis looked very dominant in it, and it kind of played into my criticism of Donald Cerrone is that the kind of counter style that he struggles with is a pure striker who knows how to start fast, and that's how that fight started and ended in the first round with Pettis switching to southpaw and landing vicious liver kicks to Donald Cerrone and putting him down. But things have changed. It's been what, 7 years since that fight happened, but I kind of look at it the same way, where I think Anthony Pettis serves the same kind of problems that has always plagued Donald Cerrone, and I do think this fight will end similarly. I am a big Showtime fan. Everybody knows that. But call me biased. I think it ends the same way. I think Pettis puts Donald away in the first round. Brock, I mean, we saw what Conor just did to Cowboy, and Cowboy's been very vocal about his mental struggles. I admired that a lot. His interview with Brett Akamoto, he was talking about how he just hasn't been showing up to fights, and to admit that is very admirable. But do you think that he is going to snap out of it and show up to this fight against Anthony Pettis?
So yeah, I agree with you. It is very admirable to have a guy do that. A lot of guys, their ego is in the way of that, or they just can't. It's very hard to say, right? Like it's hard to admit that to yourself, let alone say it on camera to however many people, But you hate to see it, but I really feel like it's just he's finally hit that point in his career where he's just not he's not able to win those fights anymore. He's never really statistically been a guy to win those fast fights, this quick starting fast fights. But I don't know. I just I got a bad feeling he's on his way out, and it's tough to say, and I hate to say it because I'm such a Donald Cerrone fan. But Pettis is almost having this second resurgence of his career now. It seems like, he did lose to Tony Ferguson, but it's freaking Tony Ferguson. He's about to fight for the belt. I mean, you can't really take away too much from a guy losing a nice like a close fight, right? I just think it's kind of his time, and this might be the end of Donald. We might see, I'll say 2 or 3 more, and he'll be done.
I got to disagree with 2 or 3 more, and then Cowboy's done. 20 or 30 more, and then Cowboy's done. It's
Right.
Cowboy. But, I mean, I took some very important notes for this fight. I have pew pew, pow pow, and bang bang, because this is just going to be a firefight. Like these two, the way that Pettis has been fighting recently, and the way Cowboy has always been Cowboy, really. Unless Pettis comes in, shoots a fireball, and knocks his head off right away, I think this might be our fight of the night. I think there's a reason this is headlining the ESPN portion of the prelims. 2 names, 2 guys that might be past it, might not be past it. I think it's pretty even. Probably a lean towards Pettis with the previous win and the skill set, but Cowboy has reached a different level since that Pettis fight, and Pettis was at his peak then. So it's kind of a weird
he won the belt shortly after that, but yeah, he did drop off significantly.
Mm-hmm. So Cowboy has always been able to maintain just below the level of everybody at the top peak, and Pettis has sort of come up and down and hasn't stayed
He's
as
fluctuated
consistent.
throughout the years, yeah.
So
yeah, that's something. I compare both of these guys. Like obviously their fight styles are very different, but their fluctuations can somewhat be similar. And I get what you're saying, Brad, because Pettis' fluctuations have been much more significant as far as the Jekyll and Hyde, where you're saying, sure, Cowboy's always been there, and he might drop down a little bit, might get up a little bit, but Pettis, it's like you don't know what's going to show up.
That's how I feel about it. Cowboy, while he's consistently right outside of the top most elite people at 55 and 70 almost when he went.
Yeah, I feel like
70.
I feel like Cowboy is going to go down as one of the guys one of the best to never win the belt. That he's going to go down as one of those guys for sure. Mm-hmm. There's I could probably name 10 guys that are on that list, but he's definitely going to be on the top of that list. That's one of the guys who, I mean, he every time he's been right there, mm-hmm, and he just can't break that threshold to get the title shot.
Uriah Faber-like.
Yes, yeah, he'd be another
guy. Who do you got, Nick, in this one?
I mean, I agree with what you're saying, Brad, but I think it just comes down to the styles and the way they match up against each other. I don't like Cowboy against a pure striker who can hit hard, and I think that Pettis is going to come in knowing what to do, even with him being very Jekyll and Hyde. I do think that Pettis gets it done in the first round, and I won't be disappointed if I'm wrong because I'm a big Cowboy fan, but that's my ultimate prediction.
What do you think, Brock?
I think I'm going to take Pettis. I don't want to see Cowboy get beat up again. I really don't. I just think that he probably will.
Yeah, I'm probably on Pettis as well on this one. I can't wait to see it. To me, this is my fight of the night, whether or not it ends up that way.
It's very exciting. Yeah, I'm very excited for this.
And then actually, from this fight, Nick, if you're ready, I'm really excited about the next fight too.
You talking about Fabricio Werdum?
Fabricio Werdum versus Alexei Ezekiel Olynyk. Oh my goodness, the jiu-jitsu will be flying. And then
I definitely like this matchup. I think this is the first time Fabricio Werdum has fought since his suspension. I had to look that up real quick, but I remember he lost to Alexander Volkov by knockout, and then he had some kind of pop with USADA, and it had been out for quite a while. Let me just fact check that real quick.
Yeah, I think he had some sort of USADA issue that got taken care of.
Yeah, so it was March 17th, 2018 that he lost to Volkov, and then, I think he got hit with a 2-year ban, and now he's back. I still regard him as one of the greatest heavyweights of all time. And there was definitely a period of time where people did have him as the greatest of all time, with submissions over Fedor, submissions over Cain Velasquez, just to name a few. But he's definitely he has the resume. It's just a matter of with these heavyweights, we never know when their prime is, when they're past their prime. Fabricio Werdum is 42 years old now. It's amazing to even think that. But he goes against a guy in Alexei Olynyk, who we know what he's about. He's about the sneaky submissions. He's about the unorthodox submissions. I think he's the only person in the UFC with an Ezekiel choke finish, and he has, 3 of them now?
3 of them, yeah.
From progressively more difficult positions as well.
Letting guys mount them, and it's insane, man. But
I mean, that's not going to fly against Werdum.
That's my
care
thing.
How good you are.
Yeah.
Werdum is a different level when it comes to jiu-jitsu. It's not going to fly. I mean,
not to disregard Olynyk's jiu-jitsu, because I think getting Ezekiel against anybody is phenomenal. But you look at the guys he's gotten Ezekiel chokes against. I mean, do any of them hold a candle to Fabricio Werdum's skill set?
Right.
Yeah. And Olynyk is what, 42?
And he's one of those I talk about where he's very fight old. It seems like his body is,
he's a mid 42.
Yeah, he walks like he's Dan Henderson, and he seems to have a very beat up body. He's not an extremely athletic guy. Obviously, he's very big, very trotty, and I think when it comes to this style matchup, it's going to be Fabricio is just going to completely negate Olynyk's jiu-jitsu, especially his entries. It's not like he has very strong entries into grappling, but I think Fabricio Werdum runs away with this fight. As interesting as it is, I think he dominates Alexei Olynyk. But Brock, what do you think of this jiu-jitsu matchup?
I kind of agree. I just feel like Fabricio is going to be the more athletic, more in shape, younger feeling fighter out of the both of them.
I gotta agree with you there, Brock. Werdum he's world-class level of jiu-jitsu, and he just puts off the energy. The energy he exudes from himself is youthful and vibrant. And Olynyk is 42 in rushing years. He's got 58 wins, not fights, wins. That's alone impressive. Is more than Werdum has fights. Like, Olynyk has been through the ringer.
That's more fights than a lot of professionals in the UFC. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, he's got 8 more wins than Cowboy has fights.
That's absolutely insane, because you think about how many fights Cowboy has. But, I mean, we look at the progression in Fabricio's boxing game. I mean, you look back to some fights where he really showed it. I remember his first fight against Travis Brown, and it's so long ago that I remember Travis Brown was actually like a heavy favorite in that fight. And Fabricio Werdum came in and was like showing skills of a high-level boxer. He had this new double jab that he had been working on, never really seen before, and his striking just looks so crisp. And I think he takes conditioning very serious, unlike a lot of UFC heavyweights. I think that's the main reason why he won the UFC title off of Cain Velasquez, is because he was so disciplined in getting his conditioning right. Even against the guy in Cardio Cain, he out-conditioned Cardio Cain.
Right. And, well, the story of that is, I think that was in Mexico City, right?
Yeah, Elevation.
I think so. Yeah. So you had a guy in Fabricio who I believe, if I remember correctly, I mean, it was a while ago, so I can't say for sure. I think he moved his fight camp out there 3 months before the fucking fight.
Yeah, he did it the right way.
Cain showed up that week. And your body, like, dude, I promise you, when I moved to Colorado, I was not used to it. Like, I couldn't even run half a mile or a quarter mile without being gassed. Like, it throws you off so bad, and you really don't consider it when you just get there and walk around. But, man, it hits you hard once you start exercising, or, like once your heart rate goes up, it really hits you hard. And to only be there for 7 days, 8 days versus 3 months, I mean, it's almost like you put yourself at a disadvantage. Like, he lost that fight by showing up a week before, you know? You would hope a guy like that knows better.
Another thing about Werdum, Nick, you mentioned his boxing skills increasing and stuff. He was working at King's MMA with Rafael Cordero, who recently was just holding pads for Mike Tyson. So that shows you the level of training he's getting in striking. If Mike Tyson's going to a guy to hold pads for you, you're
pretty good.
Pretty good.
You guys seen that video of Tyson going around hitting the pads recently?
Yeah, that was with Rafael Cordero, the guy who trains Werdum.
He looks phenomenal even at his age. I mean, I'm not clamoring at the bit to see him fight again, but I'm glad to see him still in shape. It looks like, obviously Father Time's undefeated, but he's going to have to wait a while when it comes to that one.
Yeah, man, he looks like he's like lean. He's like lean and big, like he's
big snap to his punches. I honestly think if you put him against a mid-level heavyweight boxer now, he would still win. I could be wrong, but
that should be illegal. That should be illegal.
These exhibition fights that they're talking about, Tyson maybe doing next. Right. It's like Butterbean style, king of the 4-rounder, just smashing dudes that shouldn't be in the ring with him.
But Brock, you were touching on something with the elevation subject, and that I wanted to ask you about this because I've never trained at elevation. I've never really, lived in a place in elevation. Obviously, it's a huge advantage for whoever does it. People that train in Colorado, you see their cardio is top notch, and we talk about how much of a difference it made in that Werdum and Velasquez fight. Do you think most fighters should try to get that into their training regimen? I know there's ways to emulate it with like tents and stuff like that. Do you think that should be a staple of somebody's training?
Well, it's a proven formula, right? I mean, I believe it's in Colorado it's literally sitting on top of one of the highest mountains, the Olympic Training Center. Mm-hmm. You have the best American wrestlers that we offer, and they're to the highest elevations they can possibly get to train, because maybe you're not grappling or fighting at these high elevations, but if your body is in extremely great condition at this high elevation, you're only going to be better or as good at a lower elevation. In my opinion, I feel like those guys that do have the ability to train at high elevations are greatly benefited by doing so. And mostly when it is at a higher elevation, when they are in certain areas like that. But I mean, obviously it's not a necessity, right? But it definitely doesn't hurt.
And champions have been training at elevation for years.
Forever.
Since before we had UFC, boxers would go to Big Bear. I think Tito Ortiz at one point bought Oscar De La Hoya's training house in Big Bear to train at elevation. Tony Ferguson trains in Tahoe. Albuquerque is the home of one of the biggest fight gyms in the world. Like, elevation fight team is huge. Elevation is a huge thing, but also they talk about not being able to push 100% of yourself at elevation. You could maybe do better work at lower elevation. Some people say train low, sleep high, whereas you rest and recover at elevation.
I know Dillashaw and Associates, at least a few years ago, had that mentality, right? Like he, I forget where he lives. Where does he live?
He's back in California now, but he was
in Colorado.
He was in Colorado, and he still is between, I believe.
I believe so. Yeah.
Probably not doing too much.
Yeah, I don't think he's not with that one guy anymore with Aaron Pico and others. I don't think.
He's not at elevation anymore.
Yeah, at least for a while, he would train, and they would train ridiculously hard for ridiculously long, and then he would sleep at elevation. And he had his in his garage, he had this big.
They had those high altitude tents,
chamber. Yeah.
Like,
so personally, I was just too I was too young when I lived at a high elevation to really compare it to anything. Like I wouldn't know now. It's been so long, but I would imagine that it would greatly benefit you.
Yeah. So, Brad, my ultimate prediction for this fight is, like I said, I think the Olynyk's jiu-jitsu is null and void in this fight, and it becomes a stand-up fight where I think Werdum is faster. I think obviously he's longer than Olynyk, and I honestly think he puts him away with strikes in the first 2 rounds. What do you think?
I can see Werdum getting it done on the feet. I think Olynyk might actually be able to force a grappling situation, and I don't think that's going to go well for him if he does. I think Werdum will probably be able to outclass him wherever the fight goes. Probably
Brock,
decision.
what do you think?
I agree. I think I believe I said it earlier. Fabricio is the younger fighter physically. You know, like I think you said they're both 42, but he's quicker, he's stronger, his game's better. I believe it's more evolved, honestly. Like, he's more well-rounded. I think he wins that fight. I'm gonna give him a decision. I'm not gonna make any calls on that one. I'll give it a decision.
So, I mean, this card is stacked from top to bottom. I could not be happier. Even during normal circumstances, I think this card is A1.
It's going to go down as one of the best. It really might.
I'm looking at, Jacare Souza's on this card. I see Carla Esparza versus Michelle Waterson. Obviously, we've covered all the main card fights and some of the prelims. Brad, are there any fights on these prelims that you think we should look out for?
I got a couple here. The Karate Hottie versus Carla Esparza ought to be a good.
I like that fight.
Get back into the good graces fight for Michelle Waterson. I think she should be able to. Unless we see Carla Esparza the way we haven't seen her since tough. I think that Waterson really takes that one. Similarly to that, I think unless Uriah Hall launches a spinning back fireball super kick to Jacare's face, he's getting strangled.
Right.
And old Twisted Nuts is on this fight card too.
No, well, don't forget Vicente Luque versus Nico Price.
Oh, that's a good fight.
That'll be a good one too.
Yeah, I didn't even notice that Bryce Mitchell's on this card, Brad. Thank you for pointing that out.
He is fighting Charles Rosa.
Yeah, one of the last podcasts we did
for the fight.
Yeah, well, the year-end podcast that we did, where I asked you guys your top prospects going into this year. I think I did say Bryce Mitchell because I'm just so impressed with the young man. You know, it's somebody you don't see somebody building a game off of jiu-jitsu like he has in quite a while. Yes, there are jiu-jitsu stars in this sport, and you
can count them on one hand though.
Yeah, and to see a guy be so offensive and so innovative with his jiu-jitsu and climb his way up the rankings doing it, I love it. And I like Charles Rosa. I think he's a phenomenal fighter, but I definitely I think and want Bryce Mitchell to win that fight.
I feel like this fight gets Bryce to the next level. You know what I mean? That's the fight that gives him those top 15 or top 10 fights. That's going to be the one that's really his breakthrough fight, I believe. And I feel like that for me, Brad, might be like my underdog fight on this card.
Yeah.
They've been talking a little bit of trash back and forth too, which sometimes I don't necessarily care for, but it is funny seeing them go back and forth. Like Charles Rosa saying, like, I'm gonna break his arm, right? And then I think his response on Twitter was, I almost ripped my wiener off with a drill. Do you think I'm scared if I lose an arm?
Yeah.
So,
Bryce Mitchell.
I just can't wait, man.
Bryce Mitchell does look to be coming up too. Charles Rosa is a 500 fighter since he's been in the UFC, and he's been in the UFC for like 6 years. He's had promise, but he's 3-3 in the UFC. So this could be.
The big question here is, boys, are we getting together for this card?
What do you guys want to do? We can try and do that.
Obviously, we can't go to Buffalo Wild Wings, Brad. So.
We could do it in the parking lot, dude. We'll put a TV in my truck.
I mean, we could put masks on and watch it here. shit.
Yeah, I mean, we definitely got to do something, but I'm definitely looking forward to this card. I'm looking forward to sports coming back. Obviously, it's going to be a very long, drawn-out process to get back to normal, but I think this is a good step in the right direction. I'm looking forward to this card, as controversial as it may be that they're having this card, but yeah, I mean, I hope at the end of it we still have our fight of Ferguson and Khabib.
I worry that that's not going to happen because Khabib and Conor is coming up now.
Yeah,
that's the rumor I've heard.
The new rumor is Jorge Masvidal on some sort of new season of Tough or something like that against Conor McGregor. Obviously, that is like a wild, tinfoil hat conspiracy.
Yeah,
which I don't necessarily believe it, but that's what people are saying. That's like the next thing they're hopping on right now.
I saw Dana say Kamaru was fighting Masvidal. Woodley is supposed to fight Burns.
See, he said that, and then he retracted his statement. Like he said that and then contradicted it like 3 days later. So it's one of those things where
I'm not interested in seeing another season of The Ultimate Fighter. I loved it when it was hot, but it's not hot anymore. It's time to end The Ultimate Fighter. Dana White's Contender Series took over, and he needs to realize that. Yeah, the reality show format is beyond outdated. It's not about going into a house and, having drama and, having to take over a house and wash dishes and have all these it's so early 2000s. It's time to let that go.
People look through it because they think it's corny. Like it's always been corny, but now it's like extra corny,
Yeah, and people are educated now to realize half of it's probably fucking fabricated, and
it's all fabricated. Yeah. Everything's manufactured.
In the early 2000s, when reality TV was getting hot, everybody believed it. But now, I don't understand why they're still holding on to possibly doing another season. I love the fights, but the thing is, the talent pool has gotten most of the people that need to be in the UFC are either in Bellator or they're in the UFC. So it's not like they're finding people that nobody knew about. The opportunities for MMA fighters to make a name for themselves are not few and far between anymore. You have, Bellator, you have PFL, you have, Ryzen and ONE FC, and there's just so many ways for fighters to make a name for themselves. You don't need a reality show anymore.
Yeah, I don't think so either. So, do we have anything else, or do we want to wrap it up here, guys?
I think that'll be it. I'm looking forward to this card, and I hope we meet up for that one, boys.
Yeah, guys. For Nick and for Brock and for Max playing with tape and Zach who couldn't make it today, this is the Mat Time Podcast, and we will see you on the mats.